My cut flower growing side hustle seems to involve endless decision making and weighing up the pros and cons of my potential options.
And as with every decision I ever make, sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't. But on a positive note, sometimes getting things not quite right is a great opportunity to learn and make better and more informed decisions next time. The current growing season has led me to make the decision to do something slightly differently. My studio is absolutely filled with all the remaining dried flower stock that I have available, and that is because I have very limited supply of fresh flowers available to me at the moment. This is largely due to the fact that I learned absolutely nothing from the troubles I had in 2024 with the voles eating my ranunculus corms. And I made the decision, and this is one of the decisions I made that probably wasn't the best idea, and I went ahead and I planted my ranunculus in exactly the same bed that I had in 2024, and of course I expected a different result, but sadly didn't get one. And the voles did go ahead and eat many of them, which led me to then dig them up. And in the process of digging them up, I've moved them here, moved them there, and they're not happy. I really needed somewhere permanent to keep them so that they could have got going for me and produced me flowers, which of course I could be using now in fresh flower bouquets. One of the positives of the dry weather is that I can bring all of my dried flowers in the studio to work with them, because ordinarily all of my dried flower crafts and bouquet making has to happen in my house because early spring weather is quite humid, quite damp, but of course it's really dry, so I'm taking advantage of that. That's a positive thing, and I'm able to go ahead and use all of these dried flower products and sell them to my customers. And the other great thing about having all of these dried flowers available to work with in here is, of course, I don't have to clear up at the end of each day as I do when I'm working in my house, because it has suddenly dawned on me that time is running away with me, and I've got a big 3-day market during British Flowers Week, which was in June, where I will be needing to sell the remainder of my dried flower products, so things like hair combs, wrist corsages, boutonnieres and hat pins and things like that. So that will be hopefully an opportunity for me to sell it all, and this will of course free up some space for me to get drying some new flowers again very soon. The Canterbury bells here in the cottage garden will be flowering soon, and no doubt I'm going to end up using these in some of my cut flower bouquets. The weather has been unseasonably dry with only a few April showers, and May has been dry so far, and the weather forecast is certainly for it to stay dry for at least the next 7 days. This has led to lots of my baby plants unfortunately drying out and dying, and that is because watering everything every day has been fairly challenging for me. Not surprisingly, I was disappointed with my little seedlings, little baby plants dying, as of course I'd put a lot of work and time and effort into growing them. So it led me to make the decision to get much of what I was growing out into the ground. I've still got a few things that I still want to get out but haven't as of yet, and that's just because of a time restraint. And the reason I wanted to go ahead and get things planted out, despite the fact that I've not yet had my last frost date, for me, I find that the soil in my growing beds, in my cut flower patch, retains the moisture much better than the cell trays I have of peat-free compost. And of course, the downside to having planted lots of things out before my last frost date is that I do have to keep my eye on the weather and make sure I protect as much of what I can in the evenings, and then of course uncover it all again the next day. I found myself using all sorts of things as frost protection, including old sheaths and even some old weed fabric. With the weather being so glorious during the day, I couldn't believe it when this morning I was uncovering my low tunnels and some of the beds that I'd covered, and touching the materials, the plastics and things that I'd been covering the beds with was actually making my hands so cold. It almost felt a bit wintry, despite the fact it turning into a beautiful day like today.
For me, especially with my clay soil, mulching is so important, and I will link a video in the description where I talk about amending my clay and I go into a little bit more detail about why mulching is so great. With the weather being so incredibly dry at the moment, retaining moisture in the soil is even more important than normal. So these beds had been pre-watered before planting out, and now I'm adding my layer of miscanthus mulch to hopefully help keep that moisture where it needs to be at the roots of my baby plants.
So this week has seen very much a repeat of last week. Lots more planting out the beds, watering them, mulching them, and of course then adding my staking method, which, as I mentioned last week, isn't only a way of staking the plants as they get bigger, but but it's also a great option for me to stop my dogs from walking and more than likely laying on the beds. And also it's great for me to add covers while we're still experiencing frost. A few of you were quite interested in my staking method and what the wire is that I use. So it is just an agricultural stock fencing wire. It's 80 centimetres high, and I buy it in 50-metre rolls, and that's mainly because it's very heavy. It's galvanised steel, and I wouldn't be able to lift a 100-metre roll. I wouldn't have thought. You know, lots of the people who use it in the agricultural industry will be using machinery to handle rolls that large. So for me, the 50-metre rolls work really well, and I use it in two methods. One of them I like to use it self-supporting. So basically I leave sharp ends on it when I cut it, stick those in the ground. But then I have also used it in just the same way you would a horizontal plastic or jute net. And I've done that this year in one of my low tunnels. My preferred option is to use it in smaller lengths, self-supported, but I'm sure it could be an option for some of you to use it as horizontal netting instead. Expensive, so I've gradually been trying to do the whole garden bit by bit each year. So last year a lot of the perennial beds were not staked in this method, but during the winter I have managed to do that on most of those. And whether or not I will fork out for another roll again this season, we'll have to wait and see, or perhaps I may just wait and get the last areas of the garden finished next time. And this staking system works really, really well on some of the shorter stemmed cut flowers. And although it works really well for those things that are taller, I do tend to add an extra line onto pigtail stakes as the plants get older. And this just helps to corral in the uppermost part of the plants, which, because this is a really open site and the wind really comes through, things like cosmos can break off really easily, or in some cases even become uprooted, and they definitely benefit from having an extra layer of some sort of I have used jute twine in the past, but I found that actually it would break quite often, so I now use electric fence wire as you'd use for stock, because then actually I can reuse it each year because it's really, really durable. On the plus side, the dry weather is definitely having an effect on the slug population. And now don't get me wrong, they are still causing a few little problems here and there. And some of the plants that I've planted out have had to be replanted again with spares that I've had. But if we take last year as a comparison, so far it's much, much better. And every time I find, you know, a few babies, obviously I'm disposing of them, but in comparison to 2024, the slugs are just, there is a lot less slug pressure at the moment. That's not to say that as soon as the heavens open and we get a deluge of rain again, that they won't suddenly take over. But fingers crossed, for the time being, while the plants are tiny, they're not causing too much damage. My autumn sown annuals and my established perennials are definitely faring the best in this lovely weather. Some of my spring sown plants are definitely trying to bolt. They're trying to flower and set seed on really small stems. So I think, I know a lot of you are having the same problem, and I think all we can hope is that when we cut that first flower off, they will go on to put a bit more energy into root growth and then making themselves bigger plants, and then hopefully provide us much more usable stem lengths as the season progresses. I think I mentioned last week that I've got quite a lot of oregano, and I probably don't need it all to use in bouquets in one go. So I've got this section here, and then I've got another section in the bed across the path there. So what I want to do is chop this this part back so that it will flower later, and therefore it will prolong the amount of time in the season that I have oregano available for me for bouquets. It's a shame I'm not making a recipe where I need oregano. But you know, I'm tempted just to put the oregano with no flowers in a vase, just to take advantage of that scent. Incidentally, I decided to choose the oregano which was slightly more in the shade, because I did feel, with it being sort of drought conditions, that it was a bit mean doing this to a plant. You know, it's put all that effort and energy into growing, and then I'm going to go ahead and chop it down. Oh look, a snail. In this country, in the UK, when you chop things back sort of in May time, it's often referred to as the Chelsea chop. So if you ever come across that and wonder what on earth that is, it really is just chopping things back to provide you with a little bit of a later flowering time. I don't tend to do this in my cottage garden. I really just use this to prolong flowering for my cut flowers. I've decided that Achillea, the purr, or Tamaca, is also a good candidate for having, well, half of it chopped back so that I don't have it all flowering in one go. And I have to say, this is one of my favourite perennial cut flowers. So it'll be really nice just to stagger its flowering ever so slightly, because often I don't need it all in one go. Unless, of course, it tends to flower and coincide perfectly with a wedding booking. So one of the things I've been planting out that I am not protecting at night are my grasses. And these grasses that I've got here along my rose bed are the canary grass, which I grew last year. And this is one of my favourite grasses to grow. And it dries very well as well. But it really does put out so many usable stems from one small plant. My first batch of sunflowers are in the ground, and of course this is not really so much for support, but this is so that I can cover them with frost protection at night. So this is my first batch, and I'm actually a couple of days late sowing my third batch, so I really must do that really soon this week. And then this is my second batch of sunflowers, coming along nicely. And this is the Premier Orange up. And then these are my zinnias here, which probably need watering. Some of my autumn grown stock did make it in the end, but because of the ones that died, they're planted far too far apart. They usually sort of need each other for support. You can see I'm going to have some really very wonky stems. I'm sure I did see one dahlia at least that had been nibbled off by the slugs. And interestingly, this end seems to be doing better than this end down here. And although it looks really quite dry on top, this is actually retaining some really lovely moisture underneath. This is the one in the corner that keeps getting nibbled off. Oh, he's trying again. Good effort. That's Rosemary Dawn. That's one I really, really like. Thank you so much for joining me again today. If you did like the video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to follow my growing, my gardening, my cut flower journey, then you can subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you'd like to contribute towards the making of these videos, you can buy me a coffee, and the link for coffee buying is in the description to the video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.